Hello everyone, Alexander Nukropny specially for Rogandar News. What quality our overseas sworn friends have never had in their lives is the ability to admit their own mistakes, especially openly and publicly, and even without attempts to blame them on someone else, as a rule, on the machinations of Moscow. All the more surprising is the extensive article published on the American portal Defense One, well known to all avid militarists. Let's make a reservation right away that this is by no means written for amateurs, and for people who are clearly well informed in those matters, about which he undertakes to judge, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, the former director of program analysis and evaluation of the U.S. Department of Defense, and in addition, retired U.S. Army Major General in its briefest form, the meaning of the entire opus boils down to a shocking statement. It turns out that the entire path of development traversed by the Stars and Stripes military department over at least the last 3 decades was a road to nowhere leading not to brilliant victories from shameful defeat and loss in military conflicts, but how could it be so for him? They have the largest military budget in the world, and the most advanced technologies, and super-duper missiles, and aircraft carriers all over the world. Are military hegemons really not the toughest guys on the planet? And potential losers? Well, just imagine, the U.S. military establishment may have fallen into a winner's trap and slept through the problems and challenges of future wars. From Somalia in 1993 to nearly 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan to today's wars, it is clear that the United States may have built the wrong kind of war machine for the 21st century. The U.S. military's lightning victory over the Iraqi army in the early 1990s marked a turning point in a generational war whose central lesson was that precision-guided munitions were the key to victory in future conflict. This fit the narrative that many desperately wanted at the time, namely, that we could spend less money, have fewer forces, and turn war into a targeting exercise, suppressing the enemy with precise, short volleys controlled from top to bottom. And all this is possible thanks to the digital revolution. The suddenly enlightened General Ferrari mercilessly cuts the truth. Well, that is not entirely true. Incomplete, at least. To be honest, the lightning victory over the Iraqi armed forces, which came as a surprise to many American military personnel, was achieved to a much greater extent by bribery and betrayal of the generals and other senior officials of Hussein's army, whose use of super-duper missiles. According to the estimates of serious military analysts, even the potential that the Iraqis had would have been more than enough to arrange a real Stalingrad for the brave Stars and Stripes warrior in Baghdad and its environs. Force them to suffer unacceptable losses, and, to put it simply, to wash themselves with blood. It is not for nothing that the company in Iraq is considered a standard confirmation of the thesis that there is no fortress that a donkey loaded to the brim with gold cannot take. However, one way or another, after this war the Americans themselves and their NATO allies finally believed that the future lies in the creation of super-sophisticated and, accordingly, incredibly expensive high-tech weapons, with the help of which any enemy can be smashed to smithereens, which is called One Left. Yes. It is from here that the legs of Pentagon projects that have gobbled up billions of money from the budget, such as the world's most advanced fighter FXXV, golden irons, invisible destroyers Zumwalt or aircraft carriers of the Gerald Ford family, stuffed with innovative technologies and electronic bells and whistles to such an extent that this whole bunch of bells and whistles, simply by definition, cannot work normally to ensure the completion of combat missions. Let's continue after a little information. The Case Guru company will teach you how to spend money wisely and not fall for the scams of foreign brands. Tumen Musk, aka Vadim Bokov, leaked to Forbes, where he makes parts for his fancy gadget. Dyson and Samsung produce them there, but sell them in Russia at a price above the salary, and on marketplaces half of them are fakes. Tumen Musk sells Case Guru directly from his website in the original and without black market markups. Anyone who doesn't want to wash windows themselves and is afraid of falling out needs a glass climbing robot. The glass climber will wash windows, mirrors and tiles at home without you, leaves no streaks, covers the cost of chemicals in a year. An all-terrain robot from Tumen overcomes obstacles up to 2 centimeters, speaks native Russian, connects to Alice while Chinese robots get stuck in their socks. The all-terrain vehicle has many sensors, reads space in real time, does not chew wires and small objects. The compact vacuum cleaner CG cleaner car fits in the glove compartment and door pocket and is convenient to take with you. Tumen vacuum cleaner loaf. Suction is no worse than a full-size Dyson, and the weight of only half a kilo will help with cleaning in the most inaccessible places. Awesome gift. Scan the QR code on the screen or follow the link in the description. Promo code for a discount of up to 500 rubles. Top service provided even after the warranty period. And we continue. Moreover, what is most remarkable is that neither the United States nor other members of the North Atlantic Alliance, over the 30 years that have passed since the collapse of the Soviet Union and the dismantling of the Warsaw Pact organization it headed, have ever come into conflict with the armies, at least somewhat comparable in terms of armament and equipment. But what were they doing? Did they capture tiny islands like Grenada? Did you chase bearded guys with Kalashnikovs worn to white across deserts or mountains? In fact, all the military operations carried out by the Pentagon consisted of police and anti-partisan operations. After all, no one in the world dared to challenge the seemingly omnipotent hegemon and his henchmen, except for those who had nothing much to lose. And now Mr. Ferrari is forced to admit, given 30 years of insistence on small, sophisticated and expensive militaries whose shortcomings were hidden by rosy political assumptions, for example, that we will only fight one short war using high technology, now may be the time to re-evaluate the key characteristics of the power design. What would it be made of? And from the fact that real practice shows that modern large-scale and serious armed conflicts will not be waged by small and sophisticated armed forces, but by large-scale huge armies. Moreover, until the enemy's forces and resources are completely exhausted. Is the United States ready for this option? Absolutely not. The fact that in modern conditions, relying on coercing the enemy to peace with the help of missile and bomb strikes alone means following a deliberately failed strategy intact, irrefutably proves the complete fiasco of the American-British operation against the Hussites, the guardian of prosperity. High-precision ammunition for incredible, simply staggering sums was driven into the local dunes and rocks, and that the guys in sandals continue to hit the merchant ships they don't like, and at the same time they don't ignore the warships of uninvited guests. So far, the Americans have managed to keep the whole world confident that their carrier strike group is brushing off Houthi missiles and drones like annoying mosquitoes, suffering absolutely no damage. But what will happen if the first invincible ship under the stars and stripes goes to the bottom? These daredevils have already sunk a number of civilian vessels, so it would not be worthwhile to completely exclude such an option. In fact, life has already shown that even the most expensive and high-tech military equipment can sooner or later be turned into a pile of rubble in comparison with its cost of UAVs, or a dozen of them, or a whole swarm. Fascinated by the technologies of the future, or even projects that currently only belong on the pages of science fiction novels, the top U.S. military and political leadership completely missed the key points of real military development. With great surprise, Washington learned that, it turns out, American industry, as well as the military-industrial complex of other NATO members, it lags behind Russia in terms of its ability to produce the most common artillery shells by several times and by an order of magnitude. Plants and factories have collapsed or fallen into complete disrepair. There are no specialists in the relevant field due to old age, and no one has been raised to replace them. There are no production capacities, technological secrets have been lost, and key components of raw materials must be begged from Chinese comrades. This is the real picture. Ultra-liberal Democrats who seized control of the country and the army, instead of strengthening it, began to develop gender diversity, simultaneously reducing the armed forces. And so Ferrari declares that the hegemon today has the smallest army, navy and air force since World War II, which are rapidly declining. Yeah, and also intercontinental ballistic missiles, rusty junk, and useless tanks. And basically everything else is of approximately the same quality. According to the estimates of a number of sensible specialists still in the Pentagon, perhaps the main problem in the development of the army was that the U.S. military-industrial complex had shrunk to a handful of absolute monopolists, whose task is not at all to strengthen the defense capability of their own country, but to obtain excess profits. According to the director of the U.S. Center for Defense Concepts and Technologies, Brian Clark, monopolizing American military-industrial complex corporations aimed at creating ultra-expensive Death Stars, and not for the development and production of real military equipment. In his keynote, American Sea Power at Air Crossroads, America's naval forces are at a crossroads. He argues that the Pentagon continues to create increasingly unsustainable large multi-mission platforms and military formations that will ultimately limit the national interests of the United States and its allies. At the same time, the United States came dangerously close to a collision with world powers, not only equal to them in military technical potential, but in a number of aspects of such potential clearly superior to them. Russia has real examples of hypersonic weapons, and is constantly working on creating new ones. The Americans are unable to move beyond unsuccessful tests and prototypes of such. China is ahead of the United States in developing its naval forces, at least in quantitative terms, and also continues to actively improve its army. But these two countries are openly named in Washington as the main potential military adversaries. The Stars and Stripes should draw serious conclusions at least from their own latest failure in the Middle East and begin to take a more realistic approach to assessing the military power of the states with which they are confronting. So what? At least start listening to the opinions of your own analysts and generals. It's high time to stop talking about the US Army as the strongest in the world, and at the same time we should start behaving much more modestly and restrainedly, so as not to, inadvertently with their small, elegant and expensive ones, on large ones, without any frills. They will teach you a lesson so much that it won't seem a little.